So now we have Anna Abekazis from the Nova University Lisbon. She's a professor at the Nova University Lisbon. So thank you, Anna, for being with us.
Thank you, Sarah. So I'll speak a little bit about surveillance of SARS-CoV-2 variants in the school setting. Who? Me. Okay. Okay, so that was already mentioned here today, that schools are important places for transmission of SARS-CoV-2, which can then spread to the community. And the relationship between spread in school and in the community is something that we want to look at further. And here is where the analysis of this data sets will bring us at the end, and I'll show you now. Other than that, if we combine these genomic surveillance efforts with our questionnaires on socio-demographic and behavioral factors, we can try to understand the determinants of infection transmission, and also with the mental health of children and adolescents, as Sarah told you. So WHO issued some definitions on the SARS-CoV-2 variants. We talk about different variants when there are changes in the genome of the virus that makes each different virus significantly different to a previously detected virus. And so we talk about different variants. These changes are quite common in SARS-CoV-2 as in many RNA-based viruses. And then it defines various variants and their monitoring for those who are used to signal to public health authorities that the SARS-CoV-2 variant may require prioritized attention and monitoring. Then we have variants of interest when we use the term to describe a SARS-CoV-2 variant that has changes that are known to affect how the virus behaves or its potential impact on human health. And this impact can be, for example, on the effectiveness of vaccines. And then we have the definition of variant of concern that many of you probably heard of, where we use this term to describe a SARS-CoV-2 variant that meets the definition of a VOI, a variant of interest, but also meets at least one of the following criteria: that causes a detrimental change in disease severity, that has a substantial impact on the ability of health system to provide care to patients with COVID-19, or that there is a significant decrease in effectiveness of available vaccines in protecting against severe disease. So at the moment, the WHO does not have any VOC defined. So there are variants of interest, but there's not a currently circulating variant of concern circulating. So this is also probably because the interest on SARS-CoV-2 disappeared. Basically, no one cares about it. Well, we do, but we are not everyone. So this is the evolution of SARS-CoV-2 according to a website that is very interesting for you if you're interested in these topics, called Next Strain, where you can track the evolution of different viruses across time. We have this analysis for SARS-CoV-2. We have it also for Mpox, for example. That is the last emergence. How do you call it? The public health concerns issued by the WHO. So, and for SARS-CoV-2, we have disproportionately more information than for any other viruses. And you can see here, I only put it from Omicron. So there's a part of the tree here that is missing. And here you have all the different variants that it emerged, labeled according to the different clades that emerged across time. And here you have the distribution of these variants worldwide, also colored according to the different clades that have been defined. This is also from NextStrain. And finally, this is a very recent paper that was published where you see the spike-based, a phylogenetic tree built based only on the spike region for the variants of interest and the variants of concern that have been defined. Here you have all the pre-Omicron variants, and here you have all the variants that have been variants of concern that have been issued by the WHO after Omicron, okay? And you see that there is quite some difference that we can see in the tree between all these variants. This is an example of one study that has been published. There's not many studies doing what we are doing here. That was done in Brazil, in Campo Grande, where they looked at the circulation of SARS-CoV-2 variants in schools. And this is what you see here from day 3. And like we do, so here they assigned the variants based on pangolin, which we do not do at our study. We decided to use NextClade. This is one of the assignment softwares that we have. And here, also contrary to us, we use another approach. They compare the circulation of variants according to the GIS8, which is our major database for SARS-CoV-2, and according to their the sequences that they detected in schools. And here they do it like us across time. So in each month that where they perform surveillance, they here from October 2021 to December 2022, they labeled the ones that were present in GIS8 versus the ones that they detected in schools, and they look for the differences that they found. So this is very similar to what we did here. And here I will mention a little bit, I apologize for this, but for the part of the approach in school, I will speak about the Portuguese part because we didn't have the numbers, but when I turn to the variants, then I'll speak about all the variants that we identified both in Portugal and Italy, because from Mexico, we still didn't have also the information. So this is what we did. We had this interventional study where we do the Lolin method twice a week and genomic sequencing of positive cases together with questionnaires on psychological and socio-demographic factors with the objectives that are mentioned here. This is what we had in Portugal. So we had two different areas, Amadora and Cascais, with all these different schools that included different levels of education from kindergarten and elementary school or basic school to high school levels, okay? So we had 9 schools, 143 classes and 1,226 participants. Then between the sampling was done between March and June 2023 and September and March 2024 in these two different periods. So this is how we did it. We did the sampling at the daycare or primary school or high school. Then we collected the samples and took it to the lab. We tested it for COVID. We did the pool test. If it was positive for COVID, the next day we would perform individual PCR testing on that class. And we take these samples to do the individual test and sometimes when possible, genomic sequence. So we did the pool tests on Mondays and Thursdays and the individual tests on Tuesday and Fridays if the pools were positives. So this is the genomic sequence approach that we used. So if the pool was positive, then the individual tests were performed. If these individual tests were positive and the CT value was below 28, we could perform sequencing, either NGS sequencing or Sanger sequence. If the CT value was above 28, we cannot perform sequencing because we don't have enough sensitivity to amplify the virus for sequence. and we don't perform the analysis. Of course, if the test is negative, we also don't perform further genomic sequencing analysis. So important to say that for Sanger sequencing, we only amplify the spike. So we only have an 800 base pairs fragment, while for NGS, we have the complete genome of the viruses. And this has implications when we look at the rest of the data. For our bioinformatics pipeline, so we do our genome assembly with Genius and with the Stanford tool. Then for assigning our variants, we used Nextclade. So we tried both Nextclade and Pangolin. We came to the conclusion that Pangolin is not good enough, or I don't know if it's good enough or not. I don't know. I just know that it does not assign the variants of our Sanger sequencing results, which are 800 base pairs. So I assume that for some reason they don't find that there's enough resolution to assign a variant, while Nextclade assigns the variants even based on that 800 base pairs fragment. Then we do phylogenetic analysis. We use multiple sequence alignment with MAFT. We do the addition of the alignment. Then we do phylogenetic inference with IQ3. And Andre, our bioinformatician, uses the Python ETE toolkit to combine these IQ3 results, because these trees are huge, with the information on the variants and all the information on the classes and the students, etc. So this is what we had. So we had 2,171 samples with 1,516 pool tests, out of which 83 were positive, and 655 single tests, out of which 57 were positive. Out of these 57 positive individual participants, we could have 23 samples sequenced for Portugal again. So here are not the Italian number of sequenced variants. Here we already have Italy. Sorry for this confusion, but I really didn't have the number. So this is what we found for Portugal. So there are two different assignments here. One is the lineage, what we call aliased or unaliased. This is different nomenclature, but it's the same basically. And this is what we had for Portugal and for Italy. So you see here all the variants that we identified across time, the time span of the collection dates of the study. And one important thing that we find is that many of the variants that we detected in schools were not detected in the population when we compare our results with what has been reported from the National Health Institutes. So basically, we compared our variants with the ones that were reported in Italy with the National Health Institutes. We compared our variants with the ones that the National Health Institute in Portugal reported in the same time period. And we find that in this column, you see all the variants that were detected in schools, but not in population for Italy and for Portugal, okay? Here you have, for example, XBB 1.5, which it's one variant of concern that was detected both in schools and in population in Italy and in Portugal. Also for the BA 2.86.1.1, also known as JN1.1. These numbers are difficult, were detected both in schools and in population. But still, there is something very important about these findings, because even for those that we detect both in schools and in the population, what we see is that this did not happen for Italy, but in Portugal, we detected all these variants previously in schools than in the population. So we detected in EuCARE earlier than the NIH detected it in the population. Basically, I assume that the NIH mostly reports what was identified in the hospitals from sick people or from labs, okay? In Italy, this was not the case. So we detected it in, for XBB 1.5, we detected It's in EuCARE at 17 April, and it was already reported from 7 of March. Okay, but this is a good indication that our approach is a very good surveillance tool to track the evolution of SARS-CoV-2. Oops, this was not supposed to be like this, but sorry, I didn't realize in the presentation. I think this was when it converted to PDF because it's a tree. Sorry if you don't see it properly. So this is the phylogenetic tree analysis that we did, labeled according to the variants. Okay, so this is the clustering of SARS-CoV-2 detected in EuCARE schools, together with a lot of control sequences that were collected from GISAID. And labeled with the metadata that we have. What's happened with the, it's blocked. Okay. So this is the clustering of SARS-CoV-2 cases detected in EuCARE schools. So you see here the variants, the number of cases in each cluster, the location of these clusters, the number of schools that were involved in that cluster, the school level of the classes that were involved in each cluster, the age of the members of that cluster, the time span of the cluster, and the timing of the cluster across time. So here, for Lecce, there were also pooled samples that were sequenced. This involves a little bit of potential bias here because we are not sure whether there can be mixture of viruses there. But interestingly, the clustering of these pooled samples seem to be quite coherent with the variant that was identified. So here you see, for example, a cluster between a school personnel and students that were involved in the same cluster. So this was a personnel that was assigned to a 7th grade, maybe a teacher and a child for the 4th grade. And these are other examples of one cluster within a school in Estoril from the 10th grade with 15-year-old children, and that was tracked across 1 month. One very important here, these clusters are based on the clustering of the sequences. So it can be a cluster or not. We cannot say for sure that this is a cluster, but these sequences are clustering between each other in our phylogenetic analysis. So it's not the same as an epidemiological cluster where you assign people to a cluster because they were in the same class, for example, okay? So just to conclude, so our method seems to be a rapid, simple, and cheap screening method to track viral evolution in schools which are high contact environments. Our pooled saliva screening method using the LOLI methods revealed to be a valuable early detection method for SARS-CoV-2 infection in schools. And epidemiological surveillance seems to be a reliable method for early detection of SARS-CoV-2 variants, as we detected many times earlier than the NIHs. And this can, of course, facilitate prompt public health responses and applied for future outbreaks of other respiratory viruses, like Rolf was mentioning in his presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Anna. Very interesting work. I was discussing with Francesca to better understand one thing. Were you ever able to let's say follow a full season, winter season, from the start, like October to March, April? Because I saw the two pieces, yes. Right?
Yeah, so the two pieces are related to the interruption of the school year. So we stopped in June and then we start again in October, I think. So it had to do, basically we wanted to start right in September when the school starts, but there was a problem with that. We had to ask for another informed consent and another approval. So we could only start in October, but that interval has to do with the summer holidays.
And then one more question. So covering the entire season, the table that you showed with the number of cases, those were the only cases that you found throughout the full season, or was a selection for some?
We had more cases.
Oh, okay.
But sometimes we cannot sequence, because if the city is we can only sequence if the city is above 28. Otherwise, the sequencing method, well, we could do some, we using an in-house protocol, but for most of them with the commercial kit, we cannot be sensitive enough. And the problem here, and this is something that we have to improve, is that these children, many times, their city values is quite high, because their viral load is low, and this compromises the viral load is low. We are working with saliva. In the pools, it's diluted because you have one case or two in the middle of 20, 30 children. So for all these reasons, we have difficulty in our sensitivity for sequencing.
Last bit of the question, were you able, in some of these cases, when you had enough sequence data, to reconstruct chains or transmission?
Transmission chain.
Yeah.
As I said, this is based, well, we cannot, so phylogenetic analysis does not allow to say for sure that this is a transmission chain.
No, possible, but estimated, of course.
Yes, because there can be controls missing in the analysis. For example, children that we could not sequence because they had a very low viral loads. So we cannot be absolutely sure that these are transmission chains. That's why I emphasize that these are clusters based on the phylogenetic inference, but not epidemiologically speaking, confirmed transmission chains.
Thank you.
No.
Now we have this. Sorry,
just
yes.
one note, Anna, when you say we identify the variants first, at least in Portugal, and in Italy, you showed it was just a bit later. But if you consider not only the time when the variant was first detected, but also the prevalence of the variant, so the percentage of that variant, if I'm not wrong, it appears that we see it always when the prevalence is low, even if it has been detected already, but it is a variant which is going to grow, but it is identified still in an
so in
FFA.
any case, it anticipates the problem that the variant is going to cause. Yes, true.
So now we have the school perspective, and Pierluigi Lopalco will chair.
Okay, thank you. I would invite the first professor that will give us the perspective of the school, because don't forget that the real protagonists of these studies were the schools, teachers, principals, and students. So I invite Marta Dias of the Agrupamento de Escolas Doctora Azevedo Neves Amadora. I hope I pronounced it almost correctly. Thank you.
So, well, my name is Marta Diaz. As you said, I'm a physics and chemistry teacher, but I was the health coordinator during the implementation of the project. So I will give you a characterization of the school group, because I guess it's important for you to understand our difficulties in the project implementation. And then I do a briefly assessment. So our school is located in Portugal, in Lisbon metropolitan area. In the right map, the light blue. And we are seated in Amadora. That is a small city, only 24 square kilometers, but with 170,000 inhabitants, so highly density of population. And we are seated in the Maya. Our school group, we have a cluster, I don't know how we say it in Italian, but we have 3 schools, around 100 students, with 81 classes, around 200 teachers, and 80 non-teaching staff members. And we have a really multicultural, intercultural school. Okay, we have in Amadora 111 different nationalities. And in our school, we have, this is last year data, but is around 36 nationalities. And despite of Portugal is the most representative, we should notice that most of the students that are Portuguese, the parents come mostly from Africa. So they are not, the origins is not from Portugal. Then we have lots of students from African countries, Brazil, of course, but now is growing also the Bangladesh, Nepal, and Pakistan students. We have, as I said, 3 schools, okay? The little one, Escola Básica Conde da Lausanne, is our smallest school, but the most important from EuCARE project, because they really embrace the project. All classes participate, and they are really enthusiastic, and was really amazing the work they did to the project. The school coordinator was amazing. The teachers was also really committed to the project, so they can talk to the parents and bring them to the project. Is only for preschool and elementary. They have 10 classes, about 200 students. In Escola Básica José Rui, we have 16 classes, also with preschool and elementary, but only preschool participate in the project. And in headquarters, we have 55 classes, both middle and high school, and both regular and professional courses, about 900 students. Okay, our school is really big. We have since the smallest to the big students, but also we have regular education, but also professional formation with some courses that bring the students. We also teach a profession like catering, bartender, computers, well, many courses. And also we have adult classes, okay, some to qualify, but also for Portuguese, for immigrants. And sometimes the students, when the parents come to Portugal, we ask them, invite them to participate. Well, the pictures is from our school, I guess you understand. Well, in Amadora, we have a low social economic context. The parents have low formation, and the students, we have elevated rates of school drop. But I really believe that the students feel like the school is an opportunity. They understand that the school is important to them. They sometimes don't understand education is important, but they understand that being at school is going to be good for their lives, and they are fully integrated in the community. So that's why it's so important to motivate them, for example, to participate in the project. They maybe don't understand why it's important, but we are a community. So if the teacher said, well, we are all going to do that, so it's so. The project launch, we have a meeting with Anna, Inês, and other members of the staff to explain us the project, and our school principal immediately accepted because she's a biology teacher. So she was really excited about it. And then Well, I'm a physics and chemistry teacher, but I have a degree in chemistry and I study biotechnology. So she asked me to coordinate, and well, I really like to do it. Then we do the implementation. We discuss the levels that the project demands, that is important. And we ask for teachers' collaboration, class responsibles, and school staff. We have to mobilize all that people in our 3 schools. And we do that, as Anna just told you, in 2 phases, in 2 different school years. So the challenge, well, motivation was the biggest one. We have to motivating the teachers. For example, we do a meeting, but with low participation. Then we send emails. But then what really works is we talk. Well, we are doing this project. It's really cool. Can you participate with your class? That's why I guess in Conde da Lausanne went so well, because they all motivated, the group was all motivated, but was a challenge. Also motivating the students, the biggest ones sometimes don't, no, I don't want to do that. But then if we ask, or if we do, for example, I was responsible of one class, and I said, Inês, no, put also my name on it, and I do with them. I give them, and I was doing. Then and they see that if the teacher do, we all must do. It's not that I said so, but they saw that it was important. Then the school staff, special in headquarters, because setting the operation was hard. We have lots of buildings. So they are really important, because they receive the bags, they give the bags to the teachers. Our classes have mostly only 15 minutes, so we need to receive the bag, do the test, bring the test, so they can collect it. Sometimes it was really in a rush, and they were essential to the process. Getting the parental consents also was a difficulty, because I told you the parents works a lot and have difficulty to sometimes understand and participate in the school life. They care about the kids, but they have difficulty to do it. So it was really hard. And finally, filling the forms, because we have some problems with the platform, and especially the parents to register it, and then filling the form was almost impossible. And with students, we did it because they go to the class to do with the students. But at the upside, the research team was amazing. They are always helping us at the end. And when the study is running, everybody collaborates. The school boards also give us a great support. And finally, I guess we have the community's approval, and they understand that we are participating in something that matters. So just the final one. My brief assessment is that this was a really positive experience, because we do a partnership with an institution that is recognized in Portugal and the European partners. Also, an opportunity to be participating in a scientific study that we hope that motivates the students for science. That's something we really try to do in our school, and was an opportunity to exercise an active citizenship, and we collaborate for a greater good. So, thank you.
Thank you. So I invite Professor Silvia Scandura dell'Istituto Comprensivo Magistrato Falcone di Copertino in Lecce Province. Please, Silvia.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm Silvia Scandura. I come from Copertino in the south of Italy. Thank you. Okay. Okay, here we go. So I'm here with my principal, Ornella Castellano, and I will try to narrate some part of our experience during the pandemic. So our school, Giovanni Falcone, is a comprehensive school, which means we have preschool, primary, and middle school, lower secondary school. So we have students from 3 years old to 14. The pandemic, as we've been saying this during this day, was an unprecedented challenge for every kind of education system worldwide. So we tried to face these challenges head on and to assist our students, families, and staff with a human-centered approach, always taking care, of course, of the learning situation, but also of the well-being of our students. So we established a dedicated website where we used as a hub for resources and announcements and virtual learning materials. So it provided access to families and staff to resources and also communication platforms. The objective was to provide structure and also predictability in the school day of our children when they were in lockdown, of course. So we try to implement also regular check-ins with any possible means by telephone and any instant messaging apps, also non-official, but with kind of human touch to the technological aspects of the situation. We moved online practically overnight. So we try to provide families with hardware as well, computers and SIM cards to get connected to the internet. And as you know, Italy stayed in lockdown for the whole school year from March to June. We have exams at the end of the secondary school, so it was quite an adventure, I can say. There are quite sad memories, but I have some very sweet memories as well from that period. We also stayed connected with many schools in Italy that had our same approach, and with Indire, which is the educational research center of Italy that connected many schools to exchange and share expertise and experiences about the management of the pandemic in education. So we use different learning environments for our children. So Padlet for preschool children and for primary school, and occasional Google Meets with parents to try to keep the class together. So of course, the first objective was to keep them alive. The second was to keep them learning, but also to keep them together as a class, as a group, and to keep a relationship with among them, the children, and with teachers as well. In lower secondary school, we luckily already had Google Classroom. We had implemented Google Classroom from before, so they already knew how to use it, and we just transferred the school experience online with shorter lessons, but with more or less a full timetable. When we got back to in-person learning, there was a completely different experience. So we had to organize our school environment completely and implement all the health and safety measures, sanitization, social distancing, and we were flooded with face masks that we're still dismissing as we speak. So it was quite complicated to manage also the hybrid learning, which is some students in the classroom, some students at home. We with all kinds of technological adaptations in order to keep learning in some way. So when the EuCARE project came, we were invited by the local sanitary authorities. Our principal embraced it because it was a way to keep protecting our students during this period. So we implemented with following all the guidelines, and in all grades of our schools, of course, with a variable level of participation. But for example, in preschool, we had a little bit less than 50 kids participating. In primary school, more than 100. And in secondary school, also around 100 kids were participated in the study, which is almost half of the school population. We actually expected more. We thought that this initiative should have had more acceptance from families. And we were quite surprised when we saw that many families didn't agree to the experimentations. We've been thinking about the reasons behind this. Could be maybe the fear of being controlled, I don't know. But anyway, the participation was quite high, and we were able to contribute significantly to the project. I would like to share with you this word cloud that's made with words from our students. We asked them 3 words to describe the project. So the biggest one is utile, which means useful. So this was immediately perceived as a useful, interesting project, actually fun for some way for smaller children, of course, but also safe and reassuring. So this was perceived as one of the ways that we implemented to create a safe environment with attention to well-being and security of our students. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'm inviting now Professor Chiara Stancari of the Institute Leonardo da Vinci. It's in a high school in Bologna.
So I'm Chiara Stancari. I'm not a scientist. I'm an Italian, Latin, and history teacher. So I'm here without any statistical data. So sorry, but my slides were only based on photos, because we in our school, that is Leonardo da Vinci in Bologna, that is a northern region of Italy, we have students from 14 to 19 years old, so the biggest one after Silvia's. So I have not statistical data, but I think we, the teachers, have a privileged role, internal, as an observer of the world of young people. And so I think we can say something different. So I thank so much Dr. Sara Gandini for inviting this conference, an extraordinary group of teachers that I am here for, from my school, who spontaneously decided to unite during the pandemic. First of all, to share their concern and their reflection, and then to take action. First of all, I especially thank our professor, Lorenzo Morri, who is the soul of this group, that is called Spring Presidium for a School in School. But I start from the beginning. I try to explain and tell a story. I try to. So in Italy, COVID made its appearance at the end of February 2020. When on a normal Sunday afternoon, we found out that schools will be closed the next day due to a health emergency. Students and even teachers welcomed this unexpected vacation opportunity with a bit of cheer. We can say this, as it seemed that this measure should have lasted only a few days. But news quickly spread about the multiplication of infects and a national lockdown was declared. And it became evident to both teachers and students that the interruption would be longer than expected. So we said everything will be fine. But in the meantime, however, schools were the first places to be closed. From that moment on, the so-called distance learning system was born in the Italian schools, as well as the acronym DAD, Didattica a Distanza in Italian. And from March to June 2020, classes were held through remotely. Teachers and students remain at home. Google Meet was used to carry out the school lessons according to the class schedule, so the entire day of the school. The school community faced this mission with an almost heroic spirit, we can say. Initially, the interest, the enthusiasm for this new didactic technology was a compromise for the confusion caused by the pandemic numbers and the loss of freedom of movement. Teachers tried new tools and creating amazing online lessons, and students responded, participated, or at least they tried to. The system continued for the rest of 2019-2020 school year. And going back to school, to in-person school in September 2020, with huge efforts to set up classrooms and plans for staggered access to buildings and classrooms, occurred while everything else was reopened, even though we strict prevention measures, but everything was reopened. However, in October, schools were once again entirely closed. The only institution, while everything else was organized regionally with partial closures and partial reopenings, depending on the trends of the epidemic curves. The interruption of in-person school and its transition to distance education. Sorry, I forgot my photo. This is our classroom. So you can see the line and in the paths of the tables. The interruption of in-person school and its transition to distance education became the foundation of the government's health strategy. Students spent all morning in front of a screen, confined in their rooms. The luckiest ones, the less fortunate, were stuck in a living room they had to share with their grandmother or their cousins, or in room shared with siblings, embarrassed, confined, frozen by the coldness of a screen that should have been a classroom. They were exhausted, anxious, angry, apathetic, distracted, hyperconnected. But school is the anthropological place of socialization. School is the first opportunity for young people to create community. And community can only be built in person, alongside others, living with others. Distance learning, on the other hand, had reduced the school to a non-place, as Marc Auger said, a space of complete anonymity, which makes relationships and the identity awareness impossible, and surrounds every human being with loneliness. So everything will be fine, we told ourselves. But at a certain point, it became clear to us as teachers that nothing was fine for our students. So it was clear that the educational system was relegated as a non-essential service and therefore suspendable. So some of us came together to protest. We were teaching inside the school, as you can see, behind a computer, but our voices echoed in empty classrooms. So this was the dystopic and surreal scene. At the end of March 2021, the first spontaneous action was to show everyone that our students were stuck behind that screen in those small squares where we could hardly see them, and no longer individuals, but shadows of individuals. As spring blossomed, and we took our computers and moved to the school courtyard having our lessons. We were on the grass outdoors while they were far away, imprisoned in their houses and in the computer itself. A dystopic system, invisible to many, which the Presidium in some way showed to the passers-by that finally moved freely to work, shops, and cafes. That's why our initiative is called Spring Presidium for a School in School. The Presidium openly claimed that distance learning is not school. Life and knowledge arise from the closeness between people, and that therefore we should have the courage to admit that in Italy for over a year, school had been in a state of interruption. The government faced the emergency, ensuring public education, but in form that undermined the constitutional right to education itself. They had said everything would be fine. And yet, the Presidium didn't stop. Articles and interviews in newspaper, open letters, manifestos, and petitions among many honorable personalities from the world of culture. In fact, many intellectuals in Italy were ready to denounce the paradoxical disparity in treatment reserved for education compared to the economic production world. It seemed that education could be set aside for an undefined period to prevent the country, especially students and teachers, from getting used to the DAD and to highlight its educational damage. Presidium published a book, a sort of live diary of the voices of academics, researchers, and teachers. And in November 2021, the publication of The Scuola Interrotta, which includes the voice of Dr. Gandini, who we continue to collaborate with our school. It's part of the project of EuCARE. However, it was clear that the period of distance learning would have caused serious consequences of social well-being and also psychological well-being. In September 2021, our students came back to classroom. Finally, the life of school was no longer interrupted, but rather strongly artificialized by the adoption of many prevention measures, masks, physical distancing, no breaks in the courtyard, mandatory pathways, while human relationships, especially teenagers ones, are made of smiles, hugs, and physical closeness. In September 2021, our students returned to school and we realized why everything would not be fine. When we saw them come back to class, they were no longer our students. They didn't want to leave home, taking shelter in the DAD. For the Easter holidays, I even assigned as homework to spend half an hour outdoors because they didn't want to leave their house. For over a year, the virtual world had been their only possible world, and they had lost touch with reality, frozen in the artificial dimension of a world of appearance that, following the prevailing narcissistic culture, proposes the impossible and unreachable ideal of perfection. Suspended in this unreal world, in the age of construction of their identity, they have become fragile, anguished by fears and anxiety, paralyzed by what Matteo Lancini calls the solitude of the hyperconnected. And then the most tragic revelation, psychiatric wards were filling up with multiplied cases of self-harm, eating disorders, suicide attempts, and an impressive, I swear, number of cases of panic and anxiety attacks that we also had to manage every day. In that year, I personally gathered several girls above all, at least 2 or 3 times a week, who huddled up in the bathroom trembling in the throes of these attacks. No, everything was not fine. And again, we couldn't remain silent, so articles and letters and to the newspaper. And finally, a second book was born, documenting the long wave. It's not the first, the second, or the third wave, but it's the long wave. It's the psychological and social COVID effects on non-adult world. And in this book, the Presidium drew attention to a fact that still seems not well understood: the pandemic, which had not damaged young people's physical health, and instead waged devastating secondary effects, psychological and social, on their mental health in ways that are not yet fully predictable. In Italy, it was as if the non-adult work, simply because it's the word of non-producers, had persistently been chosen as the target of restrictive choices, and its education and growth had been sacrificable for nearly 3 years, more or less. Now we teachers, those are my students, now we teachers must take on the greatest challenge: to know and embrace teenagers' weakness and help the students themselves accept it, turning it into power to rebuild a new identity. In fact, the entire world has expectation on them, but it deceives them and then mistreats them. In the 2022-23 school year, the health emergency finished and the school was finally freed from restriction. At this point, the Presidium entered a state of vigilant sleep, ready to awaken as needed, to defend students and school as a form of social life of inseparable, irreplaceable body and minds. So this is our challenge, and I don't know if it will be fine or not. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We ran a bit out of time, but I think that it was worth it, because I mean the school perspective, it's something that it's really important to know in our project. So just for the sake of time, I would like to address just one question, and my question has been already answered by you, because my question is, if you are in front to a policymaker now, what would you ask and say, please don't do it again? This is my question to you. Of course, in your case, it is clear. Don't do it again. It's no more distance learning. So for you, it's not learning at all. It is not school, etc. So I wanted, if you can eventually add something to these things that can. So you are in front of the Prime Minister, and you say, please, next pandemic, don't do it again.
Okay, I think that asking for no measure at all would be suicidal. So I might ask to limit restriction to not the acceptable level, but the useful level. Don't go overkill with restrictions. I understand from epidemiology that at a certain point restrictions have to be taken into account, but completely obliterate entire sections of our society gave us these kinds of results. So, of course, in that situation, policymakers had to make decisions without knowing most of the aftermath. Now we know. So we say, until we don't know, we do as we can, but now we know better, so we should do better.
And I think that, I mean, the entire project is in this direction, because we hope also that applying the lowly strategy, I like that. the research. I hope that this can eventually improve school attendance.
I think the problem is just one. We need more money for schools.
Okay.
Because we
Don't mention
have
that.
always less money. So we have to
Don't mention that.
protect our young people.
Absolutely.
And so to do it, it's to
Something that I'm really flattered. Why in the next generation, the PNRR in Italy, why was not put one euro in school buildings, in air filtration, in
yes.
But is there anything in air filtration? And because that is the most powerful measure that we learned, according to science, that is effective.
An incredible amount of euros to do formation for the AI for our teachers. It's not.
Maybe it's not the point. Yes, I agree. Do you have anything to add eventually?
I agree with them. I guess if in the future, well, we can adopt measures like some students come in the morning or some in the afternoon, something like that, but not to cut with the school completely.
Yes. This is something that also was debated in Italy, but I remember that it was the school unions were against it. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. I think that floor is yours.
So I invite all the people for the round table to sit here. And do we have Patricia Urban Lopez online?
Yes, I'm here. Am
Yes,
I the only
hello,
online
Patricia.
Hello. Am I the only online participant in the round table?
You are the only online participant for the round table now. But we are really, really eager to listen to your voice. And so you already gave some anticipation maybe on what could the role of the European Commission be to support the collection of evidence for a possible future emergency situation. And so in particular, the European Commission funded several cohort projects. And so maybe you would like to tell us more about this.
Okay, so thank you so much, and I apologize for being remote. Yes, so let me start with the first element of your question, because your question had several elements, Francesca. Indeed, the European Commission is committed to support research for preparedness and response. And the financial mechanism that we have at our disposal for research and innovation is Horizon Europe, which is EU funded. So it's not that we have the money from the Commission, it's the money from the member states that they invest in research and innovation. And it's committed via Horizon. And as Francesca was mentioning, one of the responses to COVID pandemic was investment in a topic on large-scale cohorts. And under this topic, EuCARE was funded. It was one of the 4 projects funded under this topic to support public evidence for public health measures to better understand the variants, the vaccination, long-term sequela, and the different research needs of that time. What we do as well, besides funding, it's supporting the impact of projects and the synergies among projects. And this is why we stimulated and supported the creations of the Cohorts Coordination Board, where EuCARE actively contributes and participates to put together the different EU-funded projects on cohorts to share experience, to also share challenges, and to see together how to overcome them, to work on aspects that were horizontal among them, like data aspects, for example, to learn one from each other. More experience or older projects from Horizon 2020, like Orchestra, for example, could pave the way and share some of the things that they had developed, like the data dictionary, and some projects could benefit from this exchange. And also it allows the creation of smaller groups, these working groups, where different project researchers work together in matters of their interest. And this is something that we are quite proud of, I have to say, because this is a forum of different stakeholders, and that, in my opinion, has really shown the value of collaboration. And here, Francesca, I really appreciate your contribution and the contribution of EuCARE there, because I think it's been very important. And last, because, like I said, what do we have from the Commission, and in my case, the Directorate of Research? We have the funding possibilities. Then we have the outcome, the projects, no? And we can stimulate this. But what else we have? We have the relationships with member states. And we try to put all these pieces together. And as I was saying this morning, a very important initiative now and a policy priority is the Pandemic Preparedness Partnership, which we expect to start next year. Because there we have member states, the ministries, the health ministries, research ministries from the different EU member states, together with research organizations as well from the different countries, working together, in this case in pandemic preparedness, and trying to avoid the fragmentation that we saw during COVID. So I think these are the elements that I think are important. Something else to say, personally, I also think that the pandemic has shown also the importance of cohorts, and how having cohorts that can collect the data, that can give answers to an evolving landscape such as a pandemic, is very beneficial and has provided the so much needed information, no, at that time, in addition, of course, to clinical trials. But I think, this is my personal opinion, it's not like a commission official statement, but I think that the research coming from the projects of the large scale COVID-19 topic have contributed and are proving the value of cohorts. And I think we will see more of this in the future, thanks to the efforts that you have done. And over.
Thank you very much, Patricia. So yes, I really agree. I just wanted to say we are now here to discuss and open to questions. So I was just starting to have a first round of for each person here to introduce him or herself, answering to an initial question, and then open for the discussion. So thank you, Patricia. And now I ask Thomas Fazzi, who is an independent journalist and the author of the COVID Consensus, the Global Assault on Democracy and the Poor, a critic from the left. So my question for you would be, was the management of the pandemic equitable? 5 minutes.
No, I think it wasn't. Well, first of all, I mean, as you said, I'm not a scientist. Maybe I kind of stand out here today, but I think maybe that's a good thing, because I think one of the problems during the pandemic was this kind of sacralization of science at the expense of all other areas of study and research and other perspectives in general. So no, the response was definitely not equitable. And I think Kevin's presentation and other presentations today made that very clear. But I think I would maybe like to focus on sort of why I think we had such, I would say, a disastrous outcome from these policies. And I think it really has to do with, I think, two fundamentally irrational aspects of the pandemic response. And I think the first aspect was this kind of monomaniacal focus on just reducing harm from COVID hospitalizations, COVID deaths, at the expense of all other forms of harm, including harm that may have resulted from the very NPI measures that were taken to allegedly reduce the spread of the COVID, lockdowns first and foremost. So all other factors were totally taken out of the equation. So any notion of trade-off, so the notion that when assessing the costs and measures to reduce the spread of a pathogen, you have to take into account the wider economic, political, social, psychological, and of course, health impacts of those measures, all that went out of the window. And this in itself was entirely unprecedented. So during all the previous epidemics and pandemics, the approach had always been that of what we would now call focused protection. So trying to keep the spread under control while at the same time minimizing social and economic disruption. Indeed, all the pre-2020 pandemic plans were essentially based around the same philosophy. Carefully balance the costs and benefits of all interventions according to principles of proportionality, flexibility, respect for civil rights, minimizing the disruption to everyday social and economic life, not spreading panic, and focusing the resources on protecting those most at risk. This was a pre-COVID pandemic social contract, if you will. Now, all these principles were completely violated during the COVID-19 pandemic. Indeed, they were completely turned on their head, stopping the spread, flattening the curve, and more in general, preventing COVID deaths and hospitalizations became overarching goals, in the name of which virtually anything was justified, including historically unprecedented measures such as national lockdowns, permanent universal masking, etc., regardless of the collateral impact of these policies. So now, even assuming that we had complete certainty that these NPI measures would have stopped the spread and radically reduced COVID deaths, and of course we didn't have the certainty, and it's far from clear that lockdowns achieved this goal, let alone the reduction of overall excess deaths, but that's another topic. But even if we had complete certainty of the effectiveness of these measures, the point is that this logic would have still been madness. This is not how complex societies work. Imagine applying this logic to any other area of life. So for example, millions of people die every year from car accidents. So if we banned cars and went back to using horses and carts, we could save millions of lives. But of course, you would kill many millions more as a result of the absolute collapse of basic supply chains, resulting in widespread famine. Indeed, if anyone suggested that, they would be laughed at. But let's take a moment to reflect on the fact that this is exactly what we experienced in 2020. So people have spoken of humility, but I don't remember much humility, especially from the scientific community, with very few exceptions. In fact, scientists embraced a quasi-totalitarian narrative that allowed for no questioning of the pro-lockdown narrative. And looking back, I think this was just as crazy as a group of environmentalists seizing control of government and telling everyone to stop using their cars and censoring anyone who dared to disagree. And I think it's important to emphasize that what happened was really completely unprecedented and I think quite outlandish. And I think this also relates to the relationship between science and politics, which has come up more than once today. So now, even assuming that the lockdown science had been completely solid, and of course we know it wasn't. We know that it was based on highly flawed models, such as the famous Imperial College lockdown model. But even assuming that the science had been totally solid, science should only have been one factor in the equation. At best, science might have been able to tell us what the impact of the measures of the spread of the virus were. But this factor should have been weighed against a wide variety of other factors about which science had little or nothing to say. But we know this didn't happen. We were simply told to follow the science. So this was the first, I would say, most striking element of the pandemic response, a kind of collective hysteria that led us to radically re-engineer and reorganize societies and economies based on a single overarching goal at the expense of all other goals. So this was the first utterly unprecedented element, and I'm coming up to the end of 5 minutes. So very briefly, I think the second historically unprecedented factor, which is a corollary to the first factor, was a temporal inversion of the cost-benefit analysis. So you'll remember that during the pandemic, comparisons were often drawn with World War II. But a comparison, to me, never made much sense, because during World War II, citizens were asked to make present sacrifices in order to combat a pretty terrifying future harm, world domination by the Nazis. But during the pandemic, the opposite moral judgment was made. So citizens were told to sacrifice future prosperity and well-being for the sake of the perceived needs of the present. And I don't know of any other moment in history in which this has occurred, where people have been invited to sacrifice the future for the present. And of course, the most glaring aspect of this was the notion that young people and little children who were at very low risk from COVID should make sacrifices in order to protect those most exposed to the virus, i.e. elderly people, especially those with pre-existing comorbidities. And now, even assuming that these measures had reached their stated goal, i.e. protecting the vulnerable, which is also highly questionable, I think it's important to reflect on how historically unprecedented this logic of sacrificing the young in order to allegedly save the elderly was. And so I think the combination of these two factors, the monomaniacal focus on COVID at the expense of all other harms, and the temporal inversion of the cost-benefit analysis, is why these measures ended up having such a devastating impact. And that's becoming increasingly apparent. And time is over, so I can't go into the impacts now, but I mean, we know that the economic impacts, social impacts, political impacts, psychological impacts, and of course, health impacts, including a huge increase in non-COVID related deaths, especially in the global South, was huge. In our book, we dedicate a lot of space to the impact of lockdowns on the global South, and especially in Africa, because it's one of the sort of aspects of this story that is always brushed aside, even though it's the most outrageous aspect of this entire story. I would say, the lockdown narrative that took hold in early 2020 was used even to impose lockdowns in some of the poorest countries in the world, especially in Africa. And of course, regardless of what one thinks of the effectiveness of these measures in high-income countries, and I'm finished, it was amply clear right from the start that trying to impose these measures on poor developing countries, mostly reliant on informal economy, informal trade, informal work, would have had absolutely catastrophic consequences. And in fact, this had been predicted by a number of international institutions, and it was done anyway. And so I think, just to conclude my first intervention, I mean, it's important. I don't think we have had a true reckoning with what happened during these years. And I think if we want to avoid that happening again, we need to have a much broader and deeper discussion of what happened during the pandemic years. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, indeed, the discussion is really what we are fostering here. Pierluigi, I should hand it over to you, but I know that you are leaving. But
yeah, unfortunately, in 10 minutes I will have my transfer.
Yes,
for leaving. So I cannot share the following part. So do you think eventually I will take this opportunity just to say a few words, because I was in the unfortunate situation during the COVID crisis to be both scientist and policy, some sort of decision maker, because I was in the regional government in my region. And I remember the difficulties in that period to take decisions based on evidence, because we didn't have evidence. It was the first time ever that we faced something that was very similar to the Spanish flu, because this is what COVID-19 is a Spanish flu, even worse. And so it was really difficult, and it was really also something that for me as a scientist, I had the need to balance the scientific position, the evidence, with the political pressure that was there. The political pressure was there because there was the political pressure that was coming from the unfortunate populistic attitude that our politicians everywhere in the world now are having towards these topics. And I have to tell you that in that situation, the first and foremost objective is to keep the healthcare service running. That is the only goal. When you face that kind of, because don't forget that Italy was the first country in the Western world that was facing, you know, Codogno, Lodi, and the news that were coming from there was the hospitals that were overwhelmed and people that were not breathing, that were dying out of the hospitals. So everyone else in the country, every other region in our country was just terrified of having people dying because they could not breathe. This was the reality. Maybe you are forgetting this thing. No? And it was something that you should face in 3 months. In 3 months. Because I was living in South Italy. So I knew that I had 3 months time to set up an hospital response in my region, okay? When this wave was coming from Northern Italy to Southern Italy. And if in Northern Italy, with a lot of hospital beds, with a lot of doctors, with a lot of resources, that one was the impact. We were terrified about what could happen in Southern Italy, where the resources were much more limited. So when we now have this kind of conversation, of a post hoc conversation, please don't forget that. Because we now are in the position that hopefully, in the coming pandemic, because a new pandemic is coming, and it will come during our lifetime, not in 1 century, not in 1 century. It will come in our lifetime, or eventually, I hope, in any case, in the lifetime of my sons and my daughter. So it will come in decades, not in centuries, in decades. So we must be prepared. So please take the opportunity of this, of what we learned. And we learned also, no, as Rolf said, in diagnostic, in therapeutics, in vaccine preparedness, etc., to face the next pandemic in a bit more relaxed way, no, than we did. No, but if we were not relaxed, I can tell you there was a reason. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
If I may add one comment to what you said, I wouldn't say relaxed. That means really relaxed, but I think we should be more self-confident, because what we started, the knowledge we started in the pandemics was the knowledge that we collected from the Spanish flu, and we tried to see what can we learn from that. And now we must not forget what we learned and what instruments we developed through this pandemic. And I think we have good tools and we have good opportunities to keep this and to be prepared for the next pandemic. The only thing that worries me, it was Francis said, don't overestimate the memory of human. So humans forget so quickly and just do not know what to do when they come a few years later in the same situation. So this is one of our tasks, that we exactly collect and preserve this knowledge for the next step.
Thank you. Maybe I think we can also just launch I think the fundamental issue is how to be able to collect evidence rapidly, because the next pandemic will be different. So we hope we have better tools like the Lolly method, for instance, but we have to acknowledge that it will be different, and we have to try to, I think, be ready to collect the evidence as soon as possible. And the school is probably showed us that we need to collect this information in the society also to broaden a bit the perspective. We usually consider patients, we usually consider the hospitals, maybe we should consider other parts of the society and be able to include them in research studies. And so I come to Patrizia Falsetti, as she is the head of the Evaluation Research Department at Invalsi. Invalsi is a very important institution we have in Italy. It is the National Institute for the Evaluation of Education and Training. And Invalsi collects periodically data, so it is a very powerful instrument to analyze, to have information ready to be used. So you made studies on the learning loss, for instance, based on the data. What would you like to add?
Thank you very much. And yes, we collect data every year in 5 cohorts of students. So every year, 2.5 million of students we assess in the fundamental, the basic skills, reading comprehension, mathematics, and also English. And we detect the impact of the school closure and distant learning. We has a national institute that make this has work. We can, unlike school assessment that can be affected by subjective criteria, specific context. I don't know if you saw the results of Matura of the last years, 2020, 2021, and 2022 are very different, are more higher than the evaluation of the previous years, because the evaluation, the assessment was different. So you cannot compare the evaluation of the pre-COVID and post-COVID. We use the same instrument, the same system of evaluation, so we can detect if there was a decreasing or increasing. I took some notes because I'm a statistician, so I need numbers. And we detect the generalized decline in results in the measure skills, especially in reading comprehension, so Italian, and in mathematics, not in English. And especially in the schools, the level, so the low secondary school and high secondary school, more exposed to the distance learning. The primary school hasn't had the same negative effect, maybe different kind of effect. The distance learning on primary school, we will see less socialization, so different kind of problems in that level of students. About reading comprehension, we saw in the low secondary school, at the end of low secondary school, so the third year, we had the loss of 3 percentage points. That is not so much. In high secondary school, the second year, we have a loss of 4 percentage points. In the high secondary school, at the last year, we had a decrease of students with adequate level of skills, so the basic skills, not the excellent students or top performance, but the minimum of skills that you need to face the life. So at the end of high school, in 2019 was 64%, in 2021 52%. So we lost 12%. In mathematics, almost the same, but we had a more decrease also in the second year of high secondary school. And at the end of high secondary school, we lost 11 percentage of students with adequate skills. So this means that at the end of school, with the diploma, after the pandemic, we had just 50% of students with the basic skills in reading comprehension and in mathematics. And they will face the university, they will face the challenge to find a job. This is dramatic. In English, we didn't have the same problem because it's a different, the foreign language teaching has more flexibility and also have a lot of online materials. Is a subject that you can learn in distance learning. Not the same for reading comprehension and again, for mathematics. Mathematics is a curricular subject that need teacher and need the presence of student at school and face and do exercise and think and have exchanging. So at the end, we have sign of the recovery, and this year we have also good news, for not only bad news, because the primary school is going great, but the secondary school improvement is lower. And this is lower, especially for the differences between North and South, because the pandemic, the distance learning exacerbates the differences between students. So in mathematics, for example, in high secondary school, we have different about 25 points in mathematics between the student from the north, the student from the south. And this is not equity. We need to give to all the students the same opportunity, and we cannot accept this kind of differences. But we have also facing an improvement of what we call hidden dropout. That is a new indicator that Invalsi created in 2018 and is a composite indicator that represents students that don't reach basic skills in the same time in reading comprehension, mathematics, and English, listening and reading. We had in 2023 the 8.7% and is decreasing to 6.6%. So some good news we have, but we still have to work about the differences between North and South, and also between students coming from disadvantaged backgrounds. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, this is really... This really makes fear. Yeah. So if I understand well, it is not easy to recover what the students lost. So for the students in the last year of that were examined during the pandemic, and they were at the last year of the secondary school, we don't know because they went in the world or at the university. But for those who were in the lower grades, and now you can assess through their path in the education, you still find a delay. Yeah, unfortunately, this was also envisaged in the beginning, but you have the proof. And okay, so I want to ask Maria Antonietta Caus to give some flavors of the situation in your school. Maria Antonietta is from 5th Circolo Livio Tempesta Primary School in Lecce.
Yes. The EuCARE study in our school initially involved 28 primary school classes and 27 teachers and 10 classes of preschool with the other 8 teachers. However, many students later withdrew with the study, probably because a positive COVID test meant they couldn't attend school. So while the school institutions considered the study as a positive event, many families saw it as a limitation. The study highlighted several measures implemented in school, and these included organizing remote learning during lockdown, and which required teachers to spend expensive time on computers to prepare and share activities with students. After lockdowns, school implemented distancing and mask wearing to mitigate fear of contagion among students. And despite having a platform ready for distance learning, schools faced difficulties, many difficulties, due to the lack of social interaction, as you said before. Teachers experimented with new tools and apps to create engaging and interactive activities. The transition to remote learning led to stress and disorientation, as the school had to quickly adapt to online platforms. And the lack of social interaction was challenging, impacting students' social skills and emotional well-being. And especially for those children who were not well supported at home. And students experienced fear of contagion. When we came back to school after lockdown, we noticed this, that children had fear to have contact with other children or with teachers because they had fear of contagion of COVID. One positive aspect we could notice in this period was the fact that teachers experimented a new way of organize lessons and experiment apps and new tools and organize activities more engaging for children. This is the only positive aspect for us.
So you say that struggling to keep the children engaged and alive, even behind the screen of a computer, gave some new ideas how to organize interesting lessons. Yeah, at least there was one positive aspect. Thank you. Ornella Castellano from the Institute Giovanni Falcone in Copertino.
Welcome, everyone. I will tell briefly about the experience with Lolly, because my school has already been introduced by Silvia. My point of view is that of the school principal who didn't enter into the concrete administration of the test, but supervised and planning the routine. I supported this project because it allowed us to make the concept of social participation concrete. thanks to EuCARE, we have created an important experience of active citizenship. I would like to thank Dr. Fedele for contacting me and inviting me to participate. The entire educational community was involved. Teachers, students, janitors, parents. Sometimes we had to adapt our routine to the needs of the project. For example, in some cases, it was necessary to open the school to allow the delivery of the kits. Non semplice, non banale.
Not easy, not trivial.
I managed the information phase for the parents of the class, where the positive coded test was detected. I received a phone call from Valeria, an operator of the group, and organized the call for the next phase. It was a very difficult period for the school manager, both for the management of her, in some cases, a real panic. And on the contrary, the management on the Novaks, who significantly manifested themselves in the construction of the cohort for EuCARE. In conclusion, I feel like saying that it was an important experience. The awareness and knowledge of the students involved was high and significant. In conclusion, I would like the health system to be stronger and able to support the needs. We would continue to live.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for all your effort for everybody. But yes, I understand from the principal perspective, it is also, but I was intrigued. You also had a problem with the Novaks groups who were obstaculating the EuCARE study. So it was not a vaccination study, but it was a scientific study.
It felt like kind of contiguous to vaccination. So the same resistance to vaccination was came up from families who resisted to this study. Were the same families that were very vocal against it.
Okay, that is very interesting. I think I don't know if Francis is here. I think maybe it is an interesting
it has something to do with the feeling of being controlled in some ways with the vaccine.
But there is something true in this, because what Maria Antonietta said before, it is actually a real drawback of this study, because when we identified a positive case who was perhaps without symptoms, symptomatic, that was problematic, because the rules asked for staying at home. So in that case, indeed, it appeared as an instrument to control and create to the single person, to the single student, a harm. The idea, of course, is to avoid the harm to the group, but I understand that there is also this problem. Yeah, so we really faced it. And maybe Karen Fassbender from the Schiller
Gymnasium Köln in Germany. You can tell us what was your experience, or Rolf, you want.
So maybe why I'm here. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Karin Fassbender. I'm the second headmaster of a school in Cologne, and this school is just next to the university, to to Rolf Kaiser, and at least he contacted me several years ago that we do the study as a pilot school. So it was not the all over the NRW, Nordrhein-Westfalen. So we started, and I think in those time we did communication all around the clock with the parents, with the students, with politics, with everybody, and at least I would recommend that they ask us now. Before, we didn't know how to manage COVID and pandemics, but now I would say get science and education in contact, and then we can manage this. This was a way that we can reopen our school, and takes a lot of stress out with the Lolly method. Also, muchísimas gracias. Herzlichen Dank. Thanks a lot, Rolf, that you contact us at those times, and at least 3 or 4 weeks ago. And so I can be here to chair this great event, and I will take a lot of that day and give it to my students. And maybe next time I bring one with me.
Yeah, thank you. So my questions to all the teachers here. I mean, currently we are discussing 2 things in one, 2 topics in one go. I think we have to distinguish between the first period, where we also experienced a lockdown, so we did not know what was really going on. So a lockdown that allowed us to see what is happening and to think of instruments. That was a period when we thought, okay, we should reopen the schools and we should test to protect teachers, educators, personnel, and of course the children. So from the beginning on, I think it was quite clear that the frequency of death in children was lower compared to adults, and especially older adults. So that was known from the beginning. We were afraid that children were spreading the disease and killing their grandparents. So, and we wanted to see, is it really a problem of spreading? Can we control it? And I saw your engagement. So how many children are educated in this place, in your school?
We do have 1,050.
Yeah, and you were not experienced before with handing out tests, collecting, and doing all this logistics.
I think about one situation. I stand outside of the building and I did the education for all classes because my teachers, my colleagues were so afraid of doing that. So that was the first step. Sorry, your question was again then?
The question was, you had to learn how to set up a logistics for testing and bringing, handing the tests to the driver, to the lab, and to distribute the results again. So that was a big challenge in the beginning, I think, for all of you.
Yeah, that was I think we start in the in vacations in springtime around Easter, and we had a really good team. Wasn't teachers, was like Ganztagsmitarbeiter. Don't know how to translate that.
So this German specialty that many schools are open half day, in contrast to other countries where schools are open all day.
So, and they helped me. We're sitting in my office and counting all the tests and doing those packages. And the first day after those vacations, it was, the first step for everybody. They were not allowed to exchange pencils or something like that. And to manage all that with a good in a good mood and without stress, that was a big challenge. But at least as a team, we managed that.
Yeah. So you stepped out of this, I would call it passive phase when there was this lockdown, and we entered the active phase. And I really appreciated your expression, calling it active citizenship. So that everyone really wanted to do something and was not sitting there and waiting. So active citizenship, I think this is one of the expressions of the day. Huh? So if we might create that, it was yours. And so, and I think what we clearly see this is that the teachers and the people for the schools, daycare, wanted to have the schools open and want to fight for education for the children. And if you do not have any comment to that directly, I would ask Elisa Tomaselli. Sorry, Tomaselli. Sorry, that's typical German. Huh? Cannot pronounce Italian names correctly.
His surname is difficult, also for Italian.
Oh, really?
But yeah. I'm not joking.
Yeah.
Everyone's pronounces it differently. So.
I think it is important that we all agree. It is good to have them in personal. I think human being is an animal of herds. You need other people to be in contact with him. Just on the screen is not enough for a child. And so we try to find ways. That's clear. And thanks to the European Commission, I think we have set up a very valuable project, and we collect a lot of data. And again, we must not just publish it and forget it, but we must have master plans in our cupboard and to take them out. And I think it is very important what you can tell us about the mental health. Can I abbreviate that to access this expression?
Yeah, just to give let's say a little bit of introduction. I'm a research psychologist and I work at the European Institute of Oncology. So it was very new for me to work in the school context. So basically I worked for the EuCARE project and I set up the questionnaires that have been used to collect all the data for the mental health. That was not easy at all. Because we had a lot of countries involved, and what's difficult when we have to collect questionnaires, because that's let's say the quickest way for us to collect data regarding mental health. What's difficult is always to find a valid measure that we can use that is translated in all the languages that we need. So this time it was not, let's say, that easy, also because we know that questionnaires do not have to be long. That's the main challenge that we have, because otherwise we have no data, and having no data is worse than having less data, but complete. So so in the end we opted for, I'm talking using the plural because it's me here today, but I've worked on the questionnaires also with Professor Ilaria Cutica and Professor Davide Mazzoni from the University of Milan. And in the end, we opted for a questionnaire that is actually widely known in the developmental psychology area, and that allowed us to capture a lot of different psychological constructs. And Sara presented us the results of the analysis today. And what I want to tell you about the experience that I had was that we prepared all the questions thinking about the main issues that were arising during the pandemic period, basically from what we thought that the problem actually was. But actually, we've never been to school before, like in the school context during the pandemic. So I prepared all the questionnaires without actually talking to the students, to the teachers before. So actually, I think that just want to say that I think that the data we actually collected is fine, and we got a lot of interesting results. But what shocked me was that I was actually also involved in the recruitment process this, well, the school recruitment and then the students. And it was not easy at all to get in contact with them because they were very hesitant. They didn't want to take part in the study at the very beginning because they were like, but what do you want us to do? Like, is that like, if you find a positive case, what is that going to happen? Are we still going back home again? Is that what's going to happen? I don't want to participate in this study because that's the main worry that they had. So it was not easy to go there and present a study because I realized that actually it was the first time when I was in the schools. I was not, well, sometimes I was alone, sometimes I was with my colleagues there from IO, and it was, let's say, very challenging to go there and present the study and tell them, okay, this is the study, we're doing this for you because we want you to go to school, and also we want you to know that we also take care of the mental health part, and realizing that they were actually very hesitant and they didn't really understand at the very beginning why it was important in that moment to do what we wanted to do. And they were very angry. They were also like, why are you doing this just now? Like, the pandemic started 2 years ago. And it's late now. We needed you before. Now we are in school. Yes, we are wearing face mask. We are respecting social distancing, but that's late. We needed this before. So it was not easy to let them understand what we actually said before, that we had no data before. It was difficult for everyone to understand how to act and what to do, what the best day was, the best way was to deal with all the situation. And we tried to make them understand how important their role was in that moment, because thanks to them, we could understand. I mean, we got a lot of feedback now, and now we do have a lot of inputs that we can use in the future to know how we can best support the students, the schools, the teachers, in case of the next pandemics, as we said before. Yeah, also, some of you talked about this morning. We're talking about science communication and the involvement of the general population. And by going school by school, I realized how important that was. Because when we were there, we were the first people that they were seeing that were involved in all the scientific part. Because when we were there, again, we were the only people they could talk to and ask questions to, because before they just adopted all the measures that they were told to adopt. They just did it because there were rules and they had to follow them. But they never had the chance to ask questions, never, to anyone. And that was actually the first time. And so, yeah, just to say that I think it's really important that all of us, if we are involved in science, it's important that we do that. We go to schools, talk to teachers, talk to students, because they will be part of our future, basically. So it's important that they do believe in science, they trust scientists, that they have to know that we are trying to do our best for us and for them as well. And yeah, that's the main thing I really realized by going school by school and doing all of this.
Yeah, thank you very much. So all of you are not ready yet, because I have one question to you. Teachers, do you wish more information, more contact to science? Do you wish your local scientists to be known and that you can address questions to him? I'll just give you one example. If you read the newspaper, I think last year it was news from China, So SARS-3 was coming. So that was basically the headline, and a few days later it turned to be mycoplasma. So do we all know what mycoplasma are? Do you wish information about that, if you heard about it? And yeah, so do you want to address Pierluigi? He's just gone. So do you want to contact him and say, hey, Pierluigi, what is mycoplasma? Do we have to worry about that? What do we have to do? This is just one example how to get in closer contact. And now this is a question to you, and also maybe you can give answers also from your specialty. But now first the teachers. So what do you expect? I mean, we are in close contact, so you may be biased.
Yeah, I have the chance to ask you every day. So
I think that we had not clear information because, as Dr. Lopalco said, it was a new event, and so it was difficult to manage. And yes, the school had a teacher who managed the situation of COVID, referente COVID. Each school had it, and they had to contact the doctors, ASLA, to understand what to do.
Okay. Question? Can you ask? What can we do also with parents?
There were actually some doctors in the local sanitary. We call them sanitary system. The local places for the management of health issues, and there were some doctors that we could directly ask for explanation. And so, of course, everything can be better implemented, but the idea of having someone to ask directly for doubts in management or in application of measures can be very useful. But there were actually, we did have someone to ask in this situation, not always with great efficiency, like everything, but there were people to ask things.
I think this point of the feeling to be left alone is very bad. So if you have someone to approach it,
maybe when there was all that confusion, but the problem was more in the news than in the official channels. The information, the spread of information at the beginning of the pandemic and during the whole of pandemic was chaos. So we had all kind of information, and everyone was saying everything and the opposite. So it was quite difficult, not only for us, but that maybe had the means to understand, but for families and with for people with a lower cultural level to try to orientate themselves in this chaos of contrasting information.
I think it's not only a problem of lower education. That's surely one problem, that you know nothing. But if you see, I must tell you this story about the tomato. What was it? Die Tomatenverschwörung. What's that in English? Verschwörung, conspiracy. Yeah, conspiracy, tomato conspiracy. So that was a story in Germany. And by the time that the tomato was introduced into Germany, that was a big success in the end. in the beginning, people were reluctant to that as well, because something new, don't like it. And they tried to eat the fruits which were above the earth, which is not healthy because of this solanium. This is poison. And then they found tomatoes are from the same family as potatoes, and the fruit must be not good, so it is also poison. So this is what people in Germany believed. And with beginning and during the Second World War, soldiers from Germany went out to other countries, as you remember. Very sad story about that in Germany. But they went to South Russia, Italy, Spain, France, and there they saw, well, delicious tomato dishes. And so that's what they brought home. And so they cracked up this conspiracy and this idea of well-educated people telling this is poison because of the solanium is in the same family as a potato. So it is not always that undereducated people are distributing false news, but especially today when you have this, what is Trump calling it? Alternative truth? Yeah. So when you move in the internet and you get your results back what you expect, so you always move in the same group of interest, and this is really a difficulty. So we have to break this up, and we want to encourage everyone to take your person of scientist of choice to ask. Same is true for the journalists. So, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that some of the most respected medical outlets were spreading, well, or at least purporting to know truths for which there was very little evidence. So it posed a very big problem that even if when you went to something that was trusted, a lot of the information there was either contradictory or frankly incorrect. So I don't think this is a question of who was more educated and who wasn't. I think what we witnessed was a collapse of the narrative at the highest levels, really.
I want to make another comment from running. I'm just curious whether schooling had the same experience as running business organizations, which I was involved in during the time. And the biggest problem was to build trust amongst your employees. And with narratives changing so rapidly from the government, you had to take a far more conservative approach with your employees. Even if I was actually questioning what was going on, which I was, I had to take a very, very conservative approach in order to maintain trust. And I just wondered whether the same thing was happening in the schools as well.
Does anybody from the schools want to answer if this was perhaps what happened, that the narrative was changing so rapidly? And if I understand well, this was the question. Conservative narrative, saying only what you really know without to manage. Yeah, but yeah.
So we've been hearing a lot that we knew nothing early on, but that's not entirely true, for example. So Ioannidis, who we've heard from today, put out a study very early on the age stratification of the infection fatality rate of COVID. I think his first study was out maybe March 2020. And it showed very clearly that among a wide range of cohorts, especially young people, especially children, the infection fatality rate was incredibly low, statistically almost close to zero. And subsequent studies proved this, and in fact showed that the actual IFR was even lower. So it's not entirely true that we didn't know anything. I would assume that someone like Lupalko would have seen Ioannidis' study. He should have, considering that he's one of the world's most important epidemiologists, and this was one of the first serious studies put out on the infection fatality rate of COVID, and subsequently many more studies came out after. And so I'd like to ask the teachers, did Mr. Lopalco ever clearly tell you that children had a very low risk, if not statistically close to zero risk of serious complications from COVID? Was that ever communicated to you?
Yes, it was widespread knowledge that the children, it was official. It was official. We knew that children were the least susceptible cohort to COVID. It was official news. There's nothing new about this.
I don't remember this official news.
Yes, the point was that school is a community full of people, and viruses spread very fast in communities full of people. Does not depend on the spreading. It's a big community, and this community is branched into families and cities and villages. So we're talking about people that stay together for many hours, so giving time to viruses to spread. So of course we like children to stay at school, but then teachers get infected and they are not children, so the probability of getting a serious form of the virus is higher. So if you take out,
Why was everyone else so scared? The question is, why were people scared of children spreading COVID? If you protected the vulnerable, which, as Thomas says, was known around January, I would say, actually, we already knew from Wuhan, that the only people at risk of dying were either the elderly or those with comorbidities. So why were we scared of children? I mean, of course, we didn't want children to get it. We knew, you're saying, that it didn't matter whether children got COVID.
No, we didn't say that.
Well, you should have said, I mean, that's the implication. If children are at low
we knew that children did have COVID in a less serious way.
Yeah,
this was official, I think.
Yeah, but why are you worried about children spreading it?
Sorry, it is not a question for the teacher, I think.
Well, we didn't have much choice, didn't we? So we were given some very clear directions.
But
Well, because I think that when there's a pandemic, the objective should be to kind of stop it. I mean, being alive should be a kind of prerequisite to all the rest, I guess.
But I think a lot wasn't as well known in that first sort of 6 to 9 months. I agree with what you're saying. I think there was a lot of concern. I think the fact that young children were not personally going to get severe COVID and die became known very, very early on. But the issue about whether, hang on, you've had your say, let me have mine. But the fact that they might be able to spread the disease was of concern. Also, when you talk to teenagers, it may be different in Italy, I don't know, but in Britain, it is not unusual for women in their 40s to have children, which means that 16-year-olds often have parents who are in their 50s and early 60s, and you start moving into the area of increased risk, particularly if you're overweight, particularly if you have other comorbidities in addition to age. And as somebody who perhaps had more operational work during the first 9 months, I can tell you that talking to families outside our intensive care unit, teenagers, whatever, about their dead grandparents, dead parents, was something that affected them a lot more, far more than the lockdown. And finally, one group that we've missed actually are pregnant women. who had a significant risk. They're a smallish cohort, if you want to say it, but we had pregnant women in our intensive care throughout, and it's particularly tragic for them to die. So I do think that the first 9 months we had poor diagnostics. The British government did not invest in diagnostics. We thought we had them, but in fact they were made in Korea, Japan, and Germany, and we didn't have them. We didn't have vaccine capacity. We thought we were going to do it. We've again gone back on that. We've got a tiny facility in Oxford, which is of no capacity at all. It can do clinical trials, and that's about it. So are we really learning? Do we have the sort of diagnostics that Rolf and colleagues have been describing, which enable us to keep the risk down, keep schools open? No. If we had another issue, we would still be struggling. In Britain, probably around 30,000 elderly people died in care homes because we were releasing people without testing because of the lack of capacity into those care homes.
Sorry,
it was a tragedy, an absolute travesty. And rich people made a lot of money out of COVID, and the poor people got poorer. It happened particularly in the United Kingdom. I mean, but we made a lot of corrupt money. A lot of rich people got richer, and a lot of poor people got poorer. The World Bank pointed that out. We still allowed it, and we still haven't arrested. We still haven't got people who made a lot of money in Britain, who are still waiting trial. They're still under investigation. Time is moving on. I'd be delighted if our tax system simply moved against them and said, pay the money back or go to jail. That's what should be happening. They're still escaping that.
May I add something? I think we knew since quite early that actually the infection fatality rate for children was very low, but also we knew that if we look at the cause of death in adolescent, it was higher for suicide compared to COVID. So we knew that. So that's why we were obliged to protect the children and adolescents and to protect also the older people. But it was not the closing school was not the way to protect older people. This, I think, is very important. The data that came out quite early. They came out already from countries that were reopening, like Sweden, for example. And so we didn't take into account of this information. And I think it was very bad.
Thank you. I think time is running fast, unfortunately. I wanted to say something also to the European Commission, to Patricia, but I wanted to start from what Elisa said. I think that was really, really important, really crucial. We arrived late in the study. It was too late after 2 years. And we didn't really trigger the study for the school's need. Although we actually involved in our project also the students' organization, and we asked them to revise the study protocol with us to give us this advice from the end user. So I think this is, at least for us, an important lesson learned, which I learned from this that, again, the school should be considered a part of the knowledge base that we need. We have to include more. We have Invalsi, which already does this, but we need to enlarge this, the power of this continuous data collection, of this, continuous cohort with the school, in order to also give the instruments, administrative instruments to the school to better manage a study like EuCARE, for instance, but to be ready with the ethical issues, with the study protocols much earlier. So if we are able to have a continuous data collection, then the studies are straightforward. But even if we are more used to start a new study with the ethical issues, with some basic protocols already there, with all the issues of the parent approval pre-ready. Then we can arrive earlier and we can collect the evidence that is needed earlier. Although I agree with Sarah that much of the evidence was overlooked in this particular case for probably political reasons or other reasons. You wanted to say?
Thank you. I'll try to be as short as I can. I think, honestly, that we actually, let's say, didn't arrive late. We arrived when we were ready to. The thing is that people don't know, like the general population doesn't know that science needs time. We need time to prepare the study design, all the ethics, protocols. It takes time. And I think that the main problem is that actually the general population doesn't know how research works. That's the thing. And that's why I think there were, let's say, there were contrasting opinions everywhere on the news. Also because people don't know that not all the evidence is the same. There are people that think like that, let's say, they believe in the principle of authority. So if there's a doctor saying something specifically, then it's for sure correct because he's a doctor. Or for example, I don't know, someone winning the Nobel Prize, like he won the Nobel Prize, he knows what he's talking about, but that's not always true, unfortunately. And we know that because we do science and we know how it works. We know how to evaluate the evidence. The general population doesn't know that. When they read, I don't know actually, but I have the impression that that's also a point for journalists. Sometimes I have the impression that journalists don't actually know how to interpret the data that scientists share. Because, for example, I'm talking about my specific field. I remember that once I read an article saying that wearing pajamas during the pandemic was making you depressed. And there were no references in the article. I struggled finding the actual paper. Then I finally found it. It was a study from Australia. And yeah, also another thing, people think that one study makes the rule. And that's also not true. And yeah, actually, the paper, I was very curious to read like the discussion specifically. And actually, the authors were very clear that there was not a causal relationship, that sometimes it's just like wearing pajamas and not taking care of themselves is just a sign of depression. So, and that's a symptom. So, so this is the impression that I have, that I realized going into the schools, that they don't know how research works, how science works. And that's why I think that we need to go to the schools and actually talk to the students and the teachers also, because when we were explaining how how a randomized clinical trial works, there were teachers asking us, is also do you actually also test vaccines in this way? They didn't know that. So I think that is the point. That is why they were very angry when we went there, and they said that we were late. So I think that was a very clear sign that we need to involve the general population much more than we actually are.
I think if Lolly has been there at the beginning of COVID story, it would have been different. Thank you for Lolly.
Thank you. If there is any burning, yes, please.
I wanted to agree with her. As I was part of the school study, and I actually took a long time collecting the samples in the schools with the students, because some teachers were not willing or sure of how to do it, or they didn't want to participate at all because they didn't agree with the method or with COVID, whatever. And I agree with her a lot, because at the first maybe month of the students doing the test, they were really like, why are we doing this? Who is this guy? Is he a scientist? What is he doing here? Why are we giving you swabs with our saliva? What are you doing with this? And I took a lot of time to just ask questions. What do you want to know? Do you want to know what I do? Do you want to know how this works, what COVID is, how COVID looks like? And everyone started being more and more interested because they saw that I was being truthful and honest and transparent. And I was asking them if they had questions. So whatever you want to know, I'm here to tell. If I know the answer, obviously, whatever field of question I did not know, I was not going to answer. And a long time, the more and more they talked to me, they were more interested in science. They were more interested in the tests themselves. They were more interested in participating, as some students actually in the middle started asking for the consent papers to actually enroll in the study after like 3 months. So agreeing with her topic, I think the communication in person is a really key point of science and the misinformation going around in the population, but also the connection between the population and the scientific knowledge. Because seeing one expert on television sometimes makes someone angry, or like her point was made, okay, but he won a Nobel Prize. He's a specialist on something, but does he really know about it? Because sometimes even we scientists doubt the person that we see on TV because we know that what he's saying is not completely true. So essentially, my point is talking with everyone and making the experience really personal, trying to go to schools and to connect with people makes a lot of difference, especially for the amount of people enrolling in projects so specific as this.
Yeah, there's another comment from there. Okay.
Comment. I fully agree with your approach, because involving the students in the process is extremely successful. In our school, we had the older students, 13, 14 years old, who actually at a point helped us collecting the samples. They went into primary and preschool to assist the teachers in collecting the samples, and we could really rely on them for the good functioning of the. So they were, as we were saying, active citizens in this process, and explaining and being transparent with children is for sure the best approach always.
Yeah, so from my side, I have to say thank you very much. It was really a fantastic, lively discussion, and we are over time already and still so engaged. That's fantastic. So, and I'm really looking forward to be together further time and to exchange. So at least this is the words from my side, and I definitely have to say thank you to the person who enabled all this activity here and made it possible that we had this fantastic European project. So Francesca, you may flush now.
But I want to say thank you to the people who really made this everything possible. And this is Chiara Mommo here. She was really a pillar. And then Sara, who came a bit later, but Sara Serrao, she's not here. Thank you really very much. So thanks, everybody. I think I agree. It was a really fantastic discussion with a very lively discussion. I expected, I said it, and but very, very fruitful. I think I learned a lot. So thank you very much. And now.